Do you want to understand the dopamine cycle? So, dopamine is a hormone that's in our brain, and it's associated with pleasure, with happiness, with gratification, with satisfaction, actually. So, it releases in the brain when you're doing something that you like so that you keep doing it, right? So, our brain functions because it wants us to survive and thrive. These are biological functions of the brain. It wants us to survive and it wants us to thrive in this life, because if we're thriving, then we're having relationships, and the future of our species is guaranteed. So that dopamine cycle is really important to the survival of our species. That's why biologically it was created in our body. So if we do something we like, and yes, that includes any kind of play, and yes, it includes procreating, but it's really about thriving in relationships, having fun, kind of wanting to live, right? You want to live. Like biologically, we're like, we have to live. We try to keep ourselves safe. We try to stay alive as long as we can. When we're in danger, we try to get out of it. So there is those functions that happen in the brain, but the dopamine cycle wants us to thrive. So it's a little bit more than biological. Like we want to live, we want to relate to other people, we want to try new things, we want to get creative, we want to problem solve. That is all connected to the dopamine cycle. So the brain has reasons for everything. So it's really interesting and very helpful. Well, my dog is sniffing around back here. Um, it's really helpful to understand what the brain's doing so you don't feel so crazy when it's doing something weird. When you understand it and it doesn't have as much mystery, like when you understand anxiety, stick with me. If you don't understand anxiety, and anxiety is a mystery, it makes you feel helpless and it overwhelms you. That scares you more. That upsets you more. And it triggers the anxiety, right? Being afraid of the anxiety or not understanding the anxiety makes you feel helpless and hopeless about it. So what we do here in this show is we try to understand ourselves. We understand our world. We understand other people. And then everything gets a little bit easier when we understand that stuff. Because then we can make sense of it. Then we can make decisions and change it. Decisions to make ourselves happier, to decisions to open our heart or heal from trauma or whatever we're doing, whatever we're talking about. I go live every Monday at 8 p.m. And so you can see me here. Occasionally I'm away and then I'll just post a video at 8, but usually I'm live. So if you are watching me on YouTube, you could put comments in and I should be able to see them. So I hope you do that. And I know that I know that my quality on YouTube has not been very great. I'm changing my internet provider and I'm going to come to you in a much clearer way starting next week. And next week, I'm really excited because I have a great guest. She's a health teacher and she talks about skill-based learning. And I think it's going to be so wonderful because I think that's what we're getting away from. I talk about Generation Z all the time and trying to help them and help ourselves as their guides. But skill-based learning is what we've gotten away from by this modern culture because we don't do a lot of chores. We don't do a lot of survival chores that we used to do. And so we've gotten disconnected with our skills. We have skills because we have been adapted. Our brain is adapted for millions of years to be what it is now. And it's adapted to be adaptable, adapted to be adaptable. So we could do it. The dopamine cycle is really important to that adaptability because we're attracted to and we want to repeat things that we like. So if we achieve something, if we figure out a problem and we solved it, it feels good. It releases our dopamine. We feel amazing and we want to try to do that again. We like challenges, not challenges that are awful and that are problems. We have those too, and we don't want more of those. We want exciting challenges, interesting challenges. We want to keep our interest charged up. One of the biggest problems out there with our mental health is we're bored with life. things are boring. We don't have to figure things out, and we get kind of complacent and a little stagnant. And that stagnation usually is isolating. And when we're isolated, no dopamine comes. No dopamine gets released. No dopamine cycles. It's like dead there. So I started to notice this in my practice. I'm a psychotherapist. I started to notice this in my practice many years ago, that these symptoms that we associate with depression, like isolation, withdrawal, not being interested in stuff, were actually symptoms of isolation that happen when people are sad. They isolate themselves. And after a while, when you're isolated, many things happen. One is the negativity that's already in your head. We're encultured to look at our deficits and have negative thinking. We have so many thoughts, nothing to do with them all. We don't have to use them all to survive like we used to. And so all the extra thoughts turn negative. And when you're isolated, there's no one to combat them. There's no way to get out of your head and into somebody else's story or into the world. You're stuck in there. So that's one thing that happens when you're isolated into the negativity. And when you have so much negative thoughts over and over and over, again, the dopamine cycle kind of gets stagnant. You don't have much dopamine, and so you don't get interested in doing anything. Like nothing interests you at all. If you ever had that feeling that nothing interests you, or if you ever had one of your young people in your life, if you were an adult and you have young people in your life, did they ever say like just not interested? Like they're not even interested in feeling better. This is a dopamine issue, and this suggests that they are highly isolated and they need to come back and do stuff. They need to spark their interest in something. And so you need to, if you are a friend, because they don't care. So if you're a friend of somebody in this state, you have to try to get them out. It does come back. The dopamine cycle comes back. We saw it during the pandemic that people had quite stagnant dopamine because they weren't doing anything novel. They weren't doing much at all. Some people compensated for that and started baking, or they started making obstacle courses in their backyard, or they started to do something creative to make up for the lack of their routine and the lack of what they were doing because they were stuck home during the pandemic. But once people got out into the world, you could see them kind of regulating and getting back to normal pretty quickly. So we could instigate that dopamine cycle to kind of come back and regulate, and then we feel ourselves in normal again. When we were isolated or the dopamine cycle is stagnant, we don't feel like ourselves at all. We don't feel like ourselves. We're like, we don't care about things that we used to care about. It doesn't feel like our values are so much part of our identity and who we are. And so not to have any, not to care. And it's not like I don't care if I murder somebody. I don't mean that. It's like, I don't care if I get better. I don't care if I do anything today. I don't even care if I eat today. I don't care if I get off the couch today. That kind of not caring is what I'm talking about. That means that reward system, that dopamine cycle is just, I don't want to say it's dead, but like the inertia of it is just stalled, and we have to get it back. So there is a blog that goes with this video, and you can see it under in the description. Maybe you're watching this on the blog right now. And so I outline a bunch of things that you could do to trigger that dopamine cycle. And they all are, surprise, surprise, something that sparks something new, right? We want novelty. We need novelty. We need a challenge. We need a goal, because those are what our brain adapted to, like problem solving, so that we could continue problem solving and survive. It's kind of amazing when you think about it that way. So when we're not problem solving, when we're really bored with life, when we don't have to do much, people get bored. It doesn't feel bored. It feels like they don't care. It feels like they're indifferent. It feels like they're depressed. It feels like nobody likes them. But it is boredom in some ways. I don't mean to be depreciating your feelings when I say that, because it's devastating on the psyche. This is not what we helps us thrive emotionally or mentally or physically. It does not help us, or even spiritually. It doesn't. Boredom is not good for our psyche, and it could have devastating consequences. So I'm not saying, oh, you're just bored and that's like whatever, it's all in your head and this is not a big deal. It is a very big deal. It's a much bigger deal than we're really looking at. Right? When we lost these survival skills, when we live in smaller and smaller households, we're not using those parts of our brain that charge us up, and we're not releasing those dopamine cycles. And you add into the mix a cell phone. Add into the mix a cell phone and the dopamine cycles that are hitting with our notifications or what we see in our phone, positive and negative, it's affecting. So it creates a bit of an addiction to our phones because that's the only place we're getting dopamine. We're not getting it anywhere else, especially if you're on it a lot. That's where you're getting it. And so it feels like I can't put it down. I need to know, what if I miss something? And so the connection between our phones and an interruption in our dopamine, though it is going off, it makes us think that that's the only thing that'll help it go off. And it's the same. It's very similar to using a substance. So some of the steps to recharge, reclaim, or remaster your dopamine cycle is to do different things, do novel things. Novelty means it's something new, something you haven't done before, something different. You want to change it up a little bit. Our brains love routine, makes us feel safe, and then it gives us some bandwidth for doing other stuff. But we don't want exact routine every day and no novelty at all. We need some novelty in there, and it doesn't have to be about everything. You could have routines about most of the stuff and then do something fun that's novel, and that will trigger the dopamine. So even it could be little as, sometimes I have clients like paint their nails a bright color when they just need to do something. And it's a cycle. So it's cyclic, because if you do something little, it gives you a little bit of excitement or thrill, very little, but it's enough to give you maybe the energy for one more thing, and maybe the energy for one more thing, and then it gets better and better and better, right? We're reversing the inertia. Inertia means like an object in motion stays in motion, and an object at rest stays at rest. If you're at rest, it is hard to get moving. But if you're moving, sometimes it's hard to stop, but it's easier to keep moving if you're moving. So when you're at rest and you need to start moving, you need to do something. You need to do something. And if you could have a friend that helps you, have a parent that helps you, I think we're social beings. We need help with this. Sometimes we're so isolated and we have had no dopamine hit at all for a really long time. We need someone else to pull us out of it. But so get that. You don't have to do this all alone. And then when you do one thing, it gives you the energy for the next and the next and the next. So that's what explains it. So, so do something novel, step out of your comfort zone. That is novelty. Anytime you're stepping out of your comfort zone, it might be scary, but there's a really fine line between thrill and fear, isn't there? Like, people jump out of planes to have their adrenaline go, or they drive really fast to have their adrenaline because they love the thrill of it. And so it's not the adrenaline itself that makes you afraid. It's how you make meaning around it. When it comes out of the blue and you don't know what it's for, and you feel really awful, like something bad's going to happen, it makes you feel horrible. But if you're driving really fast and it feels really great and you know that you have control and power in the situation, then you have the thrill. Same hormone. It's how you think about it. Okay, so delay gratification if you can. We're so used to, with our phones, we're so used to that instant gratification, that if we spent more time getting our mind and body used to delayed gratification, the gratification that comes with after the delay is so much better. We feel so good about it, productive or achieving. We feel good about ourselves. Like, it's so much more satisfying when you wait. And also it releases more dopamine, like sustainable, happier dopamine that really gives you energy for the next thing so you could sustain it. The phone just gives you enough dopamine to not tear your eyes off it. Okay, so one of the things you could do is do a digital detox. Temporarily and regularly take some time away from your phone. Like go for a walk without it, do something without it, hang out with people without it. If you go meet your friend for coffee or something, like don't take that out of your bag the whole time. And you're talking to your friend. If you have something to show them later, or text it later or whatever, tell them about it, describe it. When you're taking a walk and not looking at your phone, you're looking around you. And that's really amazing. Take a substance detox. Any substances that you could use, that mind altering substances, take you out of the dopamine cycle, out of the regular dopamine cycle, because the substances, when you're not on it anymore, it strips you of dopamine, and then you have to use a substance again. That's why people keep using it, right? So you want to have a substance detox, a digital detox, one maybe more than the other. You want to exercise, because exercise is going to release those feel good endorphins, and it's going to make you feel good. You feel like you achieved something. So mentally you're feeling good and releasing that dopamine because you set a goal. I'm going to exercise today, and you did. You feel good about that. Creativity is so good for your mind and body and spirit. Being creative. I kind of think in a lot of ways, we are on this earth to create. We are physically on this earth to create the next generation, of course, but also our brain has evolved all this time so we could create. And yes, you could see the results of that. Humans have been creating for millennia, right? And we see all the ancient ruins still, and the things that we're creating today. It's like unlimited what we could create, but that keeps us alive. It charges us up. It makes us really happy. It releases our dopamine. So it's really good for your dopamine cycle. A healthy, happy, working for you dopamine cycle. All right, what else? Deep breaths. Deep breaths reset the nervous system. And so it resets the dopamine cycle as well, because the dopamine cycle is connected to your nervous system. So if your nervous system is on like survival mode, if your nervous system is just like has no energy or no motivation at all, a reset, deep breathing could bring some renewed energy in and settle any nervous energy. And so it resets the system. And so it might, when you're approaching something, you might not be thinking about all the other stuff. After a deep breathing session, you deep breathe for a couple minutes, even 1 minute. If you deep breathe a little bit after that session, things look new. Your perception is a little more acute, and things seem new and better. And so your dopamine cycle gets back to regular as well after a deep breathing session. Sleeping well. I mean, you could hear this list. These are things that make us happy, keep us healthy, right? These are not news. Oh, this is something new Jodi's talking about today. I never heard of sleep being good for your health. Yeah, sleep is good for your health. Sleep is good for every single system in the body. So if you don't get enough sleep, it's going to affect your pleasure, your motivation. It's going to affect your energy levels, and that's going to affect your dopamine cycle. So not eating a lot of sugar. Again, general healthy tip, right? Don't eat a lot of sugar or don't eat a lot of carbohydrates, because that's going to spike your energy, because your sugar is going to go up, and then you could crash back down, and it's going to affect your pleasure. You want to eat more sugar sometimes, and then sometimes you feel really bad when you're away from the sugar and you got a crash coming. You just don't feel good at all, don't want to do anything, totally unmotivated. And so so decreasing your sugar overall is going to decrease that huge up and down, the intensity of this huge up and down. And lastly, one of my favorites is spend some time in nature. You want to spend some time in, I'm just looking at the chat disconnected. My chat's disconnected. I don't know. Sorry about that. Um, I'll fix that for next week. But anyway, so spend some time out in nature, because nature naturally makes you feel good. Naturally releases those endorphins. First of all, you're usually moving when you're outside, not always. You could be sitting still. But that fresh air, the breathing, the looking at beautiful things, the connection that you feel with the world around you totally resets the dopamine cycle.